In 1935, when Dietrich Bonhoeffer was going to visit Gandhi in India to learn about pacifism, the Confessing Church in Germany called him to take a lead in an illegal underground seminary for young pastors. Bonhoeffer accepted the call, and he shared his life and community with 25 vicars until the Gestapo shut it down. His decision to teach came from his belief that he could not withdraw his participation in political resistance because Germany was really rising up with Nazism. He wrote, "The sin of respectable people reveals itself in flight from responsibility." He wouldn't take flight, so he stood for Christ and with his people. He had no regrets for upholding his call, God's call on his life. Just 6 days before the camp was liberated, he was hanged. An English officer who had been in prison with him said this: "He was one of the very few persons I have ever met for whom God was real and always near." Before heading to the gallows, Bonhoeffer said to the Englishman, "This is the end, but not for me. It is the beginning of life." In today's reading, Jesus asked important questions of the disciples. Who do people say that I am? And who do you say that I am? Well, we know Peter. Peter's always first to jump right in there. And he says, "You're the Messiah. You're the Christ." And even though it was true, Peter didn't have the foggiest idea of what it meant. He'd been following Jesus. He had seen all the wonderful, powerful things that he had done, the teachings that he had given to them, the feeding of the thousands. However, Jesus was not who Peter thought he was. They were not on the same page at all. Jesus would not be the military Superman for his people. He was not going to impose a new regime. Quite the contrary, as we know. He would be the Messiah, and he would do the opposite. He would undergo great suffering and die under the powerful members of the day, and 3 days later rise from the dead. This is not what the disciples wanted, nor could they understand the truth because they had witnessed Jesus' power, and therefore Peter fires back at Jesus. "You've got to have made a mistake. You can't do this, Jesus. It's not right. It's not true." We can imagine the heat of the moment between Jesus and Peter, can't we? Two strong men. He, Jesus, was going to direct this train, and God was conducting the journey. Then Jesus gave his most powerful teaching. You're all going to need to embrace suffering one day. Don't run from it. I'm going to show you how to do it. Self-sacrifice is the only way. And if you do run away, you're going to lose your true self. In offering yourself to me, Jesus is saying, you're going to discover the real you. Don't be embarrassed because of me when dealing with your friends. If you do, you're going to be an even greater embarrassment to me later on. No mincing of words here. Mark speaks directly, always does. His words are blunt, and nothing that was happening was turning out the way the disciples wanted it to. They thought it was going to happen not only differently, they were now confused and disillusioned. What did it mean? Why wouldn't Jesus use his power without having to suffer? We ask the same question, don't we? Jesus heals. Jesus is the way of life. So why do we have suffering? Things are not the way we want life to be. Promises made are not kept. There's endless violence. Prejudice leads to cultural wars, the mores, and the justice issues. Oh, sin is everywhere. You and I, all of us, want to lead our individual lives well with our families as singles, but things do crash down on us. Expectations from ourselves and for others are not realized, even though they might be realistic and worthy. We may think we know best, but things don't happen the way we plan or think they should, and then we become disillusioned. And where do we go from there? Are we just going to have some resignation? Join a mass mentality? There's all kinds of those out there. Or do we hang our hope on Jesus and his truth of presence, of love, and eternal promise? Remember the words at the death of Lazarus, "If only you had been here, Jesus." And the words on the road to Emmaus on Easter night. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. And then their eyes were opened, and they knew that Jesus was the one to hang on to. He was and is our hope. The cross of suffering made it possible. And we are called to follow Jesus' leadership. The question for us today, are we humble enough to trust in God's way, even if we don't know or experience life as we hoped it would be? Are we embarrassed when we are with our unbelieving friends? Have we come to know Christ the Messiah, the one who suffered and calls us by name and calls us to be willing to lay down our life for him and to suffer ourselves and to not shy away with silence from those who are disinterested in matters of faith? The truth is, you and I don't know all that's happening in the world, to what end all the tragedy, the wars, the deprivations of life will bring. Therefore, we are called and are able to embrace a different and a mysterious reality, to live into the story that is Christ. It is a story of humility before God, who does know us, who does know the world, who does know that we too must suffer ourselves, to suffer the cross for others and to suffer on behalf of the gospel. You and I are never going to forget September 11th. I just say the date, and you have visions. You have memories of what you saw that day on your TV, what you heard. And the days that followed, and the weeks that followed, and the months that followed, and every year we can bring up that vision of what happened on that day. On September 10th, the night before, Chaplain Michael Judge offered a homily to the firemen and their families. That was his custom. He said, You have no idea what God is calling you to do. Do what God calls you to do. Put your faith, hope, and trust, life in His hands, and He will take care of you. The next day, 9/11, Father Michael was killed along with those first responders. We watched the falling of the towers, and we watched the falling of trust in humanity. We had nowhere to go except into despair or to stay close to the Lord and hold on tight. What might it look like for you and for me to have such a humility that leads us to bowing before the Lord, not only during these unwanted happenings, but coming before the Lord means we trust Him with our everyday concerns. We have confidence that He is listening, that He is present to us, that He is going to guide us into all truth. In accepting Jesus' truth and claiming Him as Lord, our focus, our minds are on the things of God, and they take precedence over the ways of men and women who try to convince us with reassuring words that they are taking us on the right path. Because our world is imperfect, because we are imperfect, we are all very vulnerable. Christian or not, we are vulnerable. So as believers, we take our stand in faith. And if disciples, we are never ashamed of God's truth to witness in the workplace or with our friends or with our families. We speak of God's love and grace through this life to the end of time because God is our guide and the protector of our souls. In taking up our own cross and bearing it in certainty in God's words to us, we become more resilient. Don't you find it that way? The more we lean on Him, the more resilient that we are. Yes, we live amongst those who will deny the things of God. It's going to happen always. We're going to be ridiculed. We're even going to be called crazy Christians. And I've decided I like that term. I like being called a crazy Christian because you know why? It opens up a little conversation. Tell me more about that. What's being crazy? Even if we're ridiculed, even so, the kingdom life is exciting with its challenges and with its joys. To all who will receive Christ and follow where He calls. I end with this little prayer from Father Michael. Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say. Keep me out of your way. God bless you, my friends. Amen.